for the couple of people watching. This is a co-hosted event, which means if you come in on my live, I'll be on the left and I'll see your comments. If you come in on Ryann or Ryan, which way do you prefer
Ryan.
that? Ryan. Okay.
Ryan.
Come, if you come in on hers, she'll be on your left and she'll see your comments. We do not see each other's comments that are made on each account, and we'll have to kind of read them and track them as we go, and we'll deal with that as they come. I would also ask that if you're seeing this now, start liking us. We're great people. Give us some likes. We love to get them.
Definitely.
So how's
Definitely.
it going this evening?
Yeah, it's been a nice chill Sunday. I actually started writing book 7 in this series that we're gonna sort of just be chatting about. So it's been a nice, productive, but like chill day. How about you?
Uh, an odd day. I'm coming off about 5 days of not feeling great. So I had COVID. No problems. Got it treated. Everything's gone, or mostly gone, but I'm a little feverish still. Um, so I think hopefully I'm on the tail end of that. Uh, add to that, I've been dealing with a lot of the women in my life having a lot of fear over the last couple days. UK, you may or may not have heard something big happened in the United States.
Well, I'm American, so I know.
You just live in the UK.
Yeah. I've lived in the UK for 7 or 8 years now, but born and raised in Chicago, and then I lived in Texas when I went to college, and then I've also lived in Vancouver in Canada, and then I've also lived in Dublin and down near London, and now I live near Glasgow in Scotland.
Wow, I'm envious. You've traveled around a lot. I've been to several of the places. Vancouver, I've been to, and Chicago's just a couple hours away from me. Um, but I so want to go to Dublin. That would just be like
Dublin's a
a
lot of
life
fun. Dublin is
goal I
so fun.
just have to make happen.
The last time I was in Dublin was in 2019, and it was for Worldcon. Are you familiar with Worldcon?
Yep.
Like a big science fiction fantasy
Hmm.
convention. I was there for Worldcon in 2019, and it was absolutely just brain-bendingly amazing. I am just like an evangelist for Worldcon now because it was such an amazing experience.
Maybe when I get a couple more books out, I'll have to find the excuse to go to it.
It's in
It's not a
Chicago
local
this year.
event
My
by
goodness,
any
you
means.
go. It's in Chicago. It's like right on your doorstep.
I, I've been hesitant to do any events yet, just because I only have one book out. My second book's coming sometime this summer. It's with ARC readers right now, or sorry, beta readers right now.
I didn't have any books out when I went to Dublin in 2019. In fact, I was fresh off of, I actually had a traditional publishing deal for my first book in the series. I had a traditional publishing deal. Everything was signed, it was edited. I was talking cover work with their artists. And then I found out on Twitter that the publisher went under. Found out on Twitter.
Oh, out.
Um, ouch. And I emailed them to be like, I saw this on Twitter, but I don't know what's happening. And they said, oh, we emailed all of our like VIP authors. And I was like, okay. Um, and so I was just in a really bad funk for like months. And I had a friend who was like, come to Worldcon with me. It's a quick flight over from London. You have to go. And there are so many panels for indie authors or just for anybody who's creative. It was a fantastic experience. And I cannot wait to go again.
I'll have to look when it is next. Maybe I'll talk myself into going. If nothing else, just
Honestly,
attend.
I'm going to talk you into going because it's an amazing experience, and it's just there's something so fun about being around so many of the people that are just as nerdy about sci-fi books as you are. Like it's incredibly it's amazing.
I've never been to an event that really had a lot of people who loved sci-fi. Um, Everywhere I've been, all my friends, grown up with, people worked with, I've never had a group that supported me in writing sci-fi or my love of sci-fi. So it's almost foreign to think that there is this entity out there. Um,
It exists.
Local libraries don't even care about a sci-fi here. So it's like they don't even want to hear about my book at a local library.
I think that a lot of people hear sci-fi and they're immediately like, oh, that's not for me because they weren't into the stuff that was maybe more hardcore sci-fi or stuff that they maybe perceive as being hardcore sci-fi. And it's like, yeah, but there's a wide range of sci-fi. Yeah, there's definitely hard sci-fi space opera stuff that's a little bit more in depth and it's a little bit more intense. But there's also a lot of like really fun sci-fi that are easy reads. It's just, it's space or it's robots or it's cyberpunk or whatever,
I'd
whatever.
actually say that most real space opera is approachable, because most
I
real
would agree,
space
but
opera.
not everybody would agree. But I would agree because I really enjoy space opera. Did you read? How do you think of the most recent space opera I read? Memory Called Empire. It came out a couple of years. The sequel came out, I think, about 6 months ago.
No, I don't think I've read that one.
That's Arkady Martine, I think, is the author for that one, and that's a really good space opera. It's like really there's a lot of different political moving parts and everything, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought that the world building was really different and unique in a way that you don't necessarily see every day.
Yeah, that's what I really like. It's I don't want to read another Expanse. I don't want to read another Star Wars. I want to read something unique and different. And that's actually what I did with mine. Tried to do something unique and different. And let's actually do this real quick. Tell me about your series. Maybe hold up a book or two. Show what it looks like. I only have a couple people watching, but hopefully we got a few more. Oh,
So this
you've
is
got
my
a whole rack of them here. There you go.
this is my series thus far. I started publishing just over 2 years ago. I think it was March 2020. It was literally 2 weeks after the first, Panini lockdown, whatever you want to call it. I had to cancel all of my book events and stuff. So I did feel like I was off to a bit of a weird start with this series, with the publisher bouncing out and then the pandemic and everything. It was a lot. But anyway, this was book one. I know that it's
Oh, do
backwards.
you
I
know how
think
to
it's
flip
still
your
book one.
video? If you
Hmm.
go into more and into
More.
setting, no, not settings. I'll have to figure out how to do it for mine real quick again. Oh, I swear they
Hmm.
change this app every time I go to use it.
They might have changed
If
it.
I go into
Anyway.
enhance, I could flip camera.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, not flip
Enhance.
camera. I could mirror video.
Okay, hang on.
Is that right
There
now?
we go.
Nope, that's not
Thanks,
right yet.
Mike. Yeah, so this is book one of the series. It's called Deus Ex Mechanic. So my series is basically Sapphic steampunk space pirates, and
Now,
it
real
was
quick,
kind of a wild.
I know what you mean by sapphic. I want you to explain that
Yes,
real quick.
sure. So Sapphic is basically women who love other women, or non-binary people who love women or non-binary people, basically. Um,
Thank you.
so the women in my books are lesbians, but I tend to say sapphic just because it tends to get, less TikTok crunching down on the algorithms and stuff. So it's steampunk, it's space pirates. There's a corrupt government, because that's my favorite thing apparently to write about, is corruption and government and overthrowing it. So this was book one, and I now have books 1 through 5 are out. Book 6 comes out in August, and book 7 I just started drafting it this morning. But each book has a different set of protagonists. So in this book we have Alice and Violet. Captain Violet is the captain of an infamous pirate crew, and she kidnaps Alice, who's the coalition's best mechanic, because her ship is busted and she has no mechanic, and she's like, well, I need to get me a mechanic. So she kidnaps Alice, and then Alice, by way of being around on this ship and this crew, starts to kind of see things unravel that she's not very comfortable with, and then, the story goes on from there. And book 2 is Evie and Larkin. Evie is kind of a bookish bartender type, and Larkin is an absolute disaster of an assassin. And in Storm Signal, which is book 3, we have Georgie and Henry. Georgie is a janitor, and Henry is a scientist. Sewing Deceit, we have May and Bailey. May is a seamstress. She's a dressmaker. And Bailey, who's a rum runner. And then this one came out a couple of months ago. Recipe for Regret is Delia and Rosie. Rosie is a cook on this super far out space station, kind of at the edge of the known galaxy. And Delia, who's a radio journalist. So that's what I've got so far. And then book 6 is going to be a spy and the rebel faction leader that she's chasing. And book 7 will then return to all of the characters to kind of close the series out.
So it's the same universe, different characters, and then build to get a story that'll accumulate?
Yeah, and you still see all of the other characters throughout the other books, even though they're not centered on those characters. You still see Alice and Violet throughout all of the other books. You still see the rest of them and all that kind of thing.
So, if you didn't realize that, you just added a bunch of books to my reading list. No, they actually sound great. I enjoy a great space fantasy. I enjoy a good space opera. And even though I'm a straight male, I enjoy reading books from other perspectives. And I think every perspective is great. Let me
Yeah,
describe my
definitely.
book, and you might even understand what I do with some of that.
I'm
So,
ready.
my book, the first one is The After. Um, it's book one in the Afterverse series. And it's, if you didn't catch it from the name, it's really set as an alternate afterlife. So the main character passes away initially in the book and then finds himself in a new universe, specifically in a ship with an existing ragtag crew. Um, a lot of things happen between them. They become great friends, have a bit of problems. There's a one of the main characters reveals that she's actually thought in her previous life she was a former man. She now reveals that she thinks she's a lesbian, but is not sure where that will go. One of the other characters is dealing with some level of abuse from after she arrived in this reality. Everyone there was from Earth, but after they passed away, arrived in this reality. Um, the main, enemy in this story is a cult-like religious organization that is actually hunting one of the characters, and that leads into a fairly interesting battle and then a pretty severe battle. And that sets the stage for the next book, where it comes in after a major battle and starts really building out the story, not just between the characters even more, but between what the religious organization is doing, where they're what their space in the universe is, and kind of the long term solution to that problem. I
That's a really
plan.
interesting take on sort of an afterlife kind of alternate universe. Like that's a really interesting take, I think. And
Yeah,
when did you say your next book's coming out?
next book should be out within before the end of the summer.
Great,
So
that sounds great.
working on it pretty soon, and I've got a novella I've started that I think will be out early fall. So I'm starting to get some speed on some of this, some of the books. I did actually. It only took me about 3.5, 4 months to get my book published, uh, edited, released, all of that. Um, and that was in January when I released it this year.
You're you're an indie author as well, right?
Yes,
Correct?
yes. So I'm publishing it myself, producing it myself. On the second one, I'm even doing the artwork myself. Um, and I actually think I like the cover of the second one better than I do the first one. I love the first one. Um, so yeah, I'm
Yeah,
doing it
I'm
all
really
together.
lucky. I'm really lucky and spoiled in that my wife does all my covers for me.
That's that's
I never have
nice.
to worry about it. I'm just like, just come up with something good, and it's always better than whatever I had in mind.
I didn't know what I really wanted for this first one. You're getting a little glare there. Not sure where the glare is coming from. Oh, it's coming from your
My
video.
phone.
How funny. Um, so this, if you, I don't know if you can catch it all, but this cover, I told an artist on Fiverr what I thought I wanted, and they came back first with shirtless. I wasn't really going for that, but once we found a uniform for the individual, um, I loved that cover. $50, and I was kind of shocked that $50 I got a quality cover better than most covers I've seen on recent indie releases. Um, but then I went for the second one, and I'm between jobs right now due to COVID stuff, and I decided I'm going to try to save a little money. So even at that point, I just designed, took a shot with Canva. I I'm a VP of software engineering, so I have a software engineering background, but I have never been a um, an artist of any type. So I know
Canva
how to
is
use.
such a good resource, though. We're all just out here coasting with Canva.
Yeah, you pretty much are. But I managed to put something together great, and I just loved it. So I'm
Yeah,
happy
like
about that.
it's a really great looking cover. And from what you've said about your book series, I think like it probably fits really well in this sort of, almost what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for. I'm a writer who can't think of the word that I'm looking for. Visceral
Uh,
is the word I'm looking
every
for.
time we're
In this kind
live,
of
it'll happen.
visceral case that you're creating. Um, I think that I know personally when I was picking out fonts for my covers, I think I looked at like thousands, thousands and thousands and thousands of just fonts.
Yeah, I did the same. The person that did this cover, I actually wanted to try to replicate the font on the second cover, and they couldn't figure out what font they used, which drives me nuts, for this cover to tell me. Um, so I think
Ugh,
there might be a little bit of lying in that statement, but that's where they went with that. And I've looked at probably, oh God, I can't even count the number of thousands of fonts to try to match this, and
so
I
many
could.
fonts.
It's
You
not
go a bit
possible.
font blind after a while, don't you? Where you're just like they're all starting to look roughly the same.
Yeah, yeah, and even the ones that I have a very unique A on this one, and I thought, okay, I could single in on only the A's that look like that. There's like 10,000 fonts that look, with that specific what I thought was a unique A, and that it's textured. Yeah, yeah, I'm so I got something that looked equally as nice for the second one, and that'll be my standard moving forward.
I know what you mean, though. It's nice having a nice textured font. I got a couple of comments on my end. I had somebody, the name Chaplin, said, Cricket Chronicles should be on everybody's reading list. They're excellent. Thank you very much for that. And A Nebulous Purpose said, excellent book series, and thank you for that as well. I am very excited. Do you know, I didn't think that I was going to have like emotional feelings writing the final book in the series, but I started writing it this morning and I was like, oh no, I am having some sort of weird feelings about preparing to like tie up this universe and this world that I've been writing in for the last 3 years or whatever.
Did you just start your universe as you started writing, thinking about it, or is this something you've had in your mind for a long period of time?
Do you know I'm very chaotic when I write? And I've tried being like a plotter, somebody who plans loads of stuff out, but then I realized that when I start writing, I just change it all anyway. So I've given up. But Ex Mechanic, which was the first book in the series, I actually wrote. I was on a train coming back from this business meeting, and it was like a long train journey, and it was hot, and the AC wasn't working on the train, and the Wi-Fi wasn't working on the train. And you're just like, oh my god, this is gonna be like 4 hours where you're just like, please. And my phone was about to die, and I didn't have my charger, and you're just like, oh god. So I had a notebook with me, and I just started scribbling out this random idea. It wasn't something that had lived in my head or anything. I had this kind of vague idea of, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote, lesbian pirates? And then I was like, but in space, because sci-fi is kind of my jam. Like I grew up watching, the Twilight Zone and all this kind of stuff. Um, and so I just kind of scribbled out an idea, and when I got home, wrote a couple of chapters, and I was like, I don't know how I'm feeling about this. And it was actually my wife who was like, no, because I need to know what happens next. So you have to keep writing. Like you started this, you're not allowed to like stop it. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. Like I don't know if it's any good. And she was like, no, you have to like just keep going. Like you've got to keep writing now. And
Is she a
honestly, like
sci-fi fan
you
as
know,
well?
yeah, like we're both, similarly nerdy. I remember when I first described it as being like steampunk, she was like, "Oh, I don't know if steampunk is quite my aesthetic." And I was like, "Oh, that's fine. Just stay with me. Um, like stay with me in the series and just kind of see how you feel about it." Um, and honestly, like she's been my biggest champion throughout the whole thing. And she's why I kept writing. Like I wrote Deus Ex Mechanic was supposed to be a standalone book. It wasn't supposed to be a series. And then that publisher folded, and I went to Worldcon, and I sort of tried to get my head together. And somebody who knew about the first book kind of just randomly said to me, "Oh, I can't wait until you write book two." And I had never mentioned writing a book two. I was talking to her about writing a completely different book. Um, that I was thinking of. And I was like, could I write a book too? Could this be a series? And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, why not? And so then I wrote, I can't even find it right now. I wrote Imperfect Shot, which is the second book in the series. I wrote Imperfect Shot, and it just kind of carried on from there. And after I wrote this one, I was like, well, I better decide how many books I want in this series. Otherwise, it could just potentially just keep going, forever and ever. And so I decided, well, 7 is not a round number. I don't know why I decided on 7, but I decided on 7, and that's what we're doing. So yeah, no, it was just kind of just a random thing but that's just seems to be how most of my stuff works. But how about you? Like, do you plan? Are you a planner, or are you more of a development writer,
So
discovery writer?
I'm a pure pantser. Well, I'll sometimes go forward and say I want this chapter and do a chapter title in advance, but that's the limit to my plotting, and I don't even do that very often. But I do have the idea. So I've had sci-fi ideas in my head since I think I was born.
Yeah.
It would just, I was the only one in my family, and before it was even on TV, that was just kind of the things I thought about. Um, Even through school, it was where I went with it. My school, when I was growing up, they didn't have sci-fi. They didn't have a lot of fantasy. The public library had a smidgen. It wasn't until I found a used bookstore that I really, really got into what the depth of what I've been loving, since I was in existence, that I really got to read into it. And you can even see some of the things I found behind me. The only books that made it across country with me were from Isaac Asimov. And so I've got some of the obscure ones that I found at like used bookstores and stuff. Um,
See, for
and I
me, the
really fell in
formative
love.
stuff was definitely Octavia Butler was a lot of the formative stuff, or Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yeah, for me, I've loved those, but Isaac Asimov screamed to me to be he took a approach that really, even though he was a brilliant man, he even wrote like books for colleges and schools and stuff, and he was just really smart. He could write really complicated and beautifully. He took a different approach with his books. He wrote it at a more accessible level. And what happened is he gained an audience that he didn't expect because they were able to read his work and understand it, and it wasn't overly complex. And I really appreciated that coming from a family of people that never even read books. I thought that might be a way to reach out to people to really get your story across. And I've actually found that people love how I write, so I think I've gotten there. One of the best bits of feedback I got is someone who saw me live, decided to pick up my book, and typically only reads romance, has never even thought about doing a sci-fi book. They picked up my book, read it, fell in love with it. They are now my number one fan. They've done several, amazing review videos on this. They are a beta reader for my second book. They're drooling for the third book, because I wrote it in a way that is accessible enough for anyone to approach it, but it's still the story I want. It's still the sci-fi story, space opera story I like.
Sometimes people get hung up on the word accessibility, and because they think that maybe it means it's not as good or it's not as deep, and it's like, well, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
Because
it's not about the
I went
depth. It's about
well,
the.
I went to school for music initially. I didn't go to school for writing. I went to school for music. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever had was my composition instructor, who he said, listen, if you want your pieces to be performed by actual musicians, you need to make the music readable. You have to make it accessible. Otherwise, people are spending 4 hours of rehearsal time on 2 bars of music. Nobody's going to want to perform your pieces because it's not worth the rehearsal time. And so I don't know, maybe that kind of message of like, write it so that it's fun, write it so that it's accessible, write the chapters so that each chapter doesn't take an hour to read, to keep them
And
a bit
write
light and more moving.
write it so it feels like you, right? So write it so you feel like you could be the character that's actually in the story. You don't have to be someone who's super complex. I could be, you know, whoever I am in any job, any career, any training. and still find that I could be this person that lands in this other universe that has these other experiences. And it's not about depth. You can get into the depth. It's just not about challenging people to understand your work. I've had some conversations with some hard sci-fi authors, and their goal is to challenge their readers. Space opera doesn't feel like you should ever do that. That's just, if Star Wars was challenging.
There's enough to keep track of already. You don't need to make it worse.
Yeah. If you get into complex relationships enough to keep in check, to just, why put in the science? Science fiction doesn't necessarily have to go into how it works. If you were living in the future, if you were living on a spaceship, you wouldn't necessarily know how the spaceship runs, and that's the approach I take.
I actually had a really interesting conversation about that specifically earlier today with a guy who's in my writing group, and he was saying that he recently read a story. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was, but he was saying that he read a story where it was a bit like it's somebody who lives and works on a ship, and the ship does run on science, but the person whose point of view it is, she's not the person who built the ship. She's not a mechanic. Why would she know how everything works? So when stuff goes wrong, she's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because if you put me on a ship up to the moon, would I know what the hell to do if it broke down? No.
No,
I know
and,
the
and
general
that's
concept of how it gets up there, but I wouldn't know the first thing about fixing it.
and if you kind of follow the idea that high enough technology is indistinguishable from magic, which I think is true, you can't get someone who doesn't know explicitly what the magic is to know how to perform it. So I wouldn't expect to have to train the novice reader on the magic of a spaceship. I want them just to enjoy the magic.
Yeah, just to settle into the world and just escape into a different world with fun, with fun world building elements. And like for me, I think a lot of things are very character focused for me, and it all just kind of branches from there. I had, going into writing book one, I had like a general idea of what I wanted kind of the world to be like, but it did, because I wrote it as a standalone, like there is world building in it, but I feel like the world building in this series like really opens up in like books 2 and 3 when stuff starts getting a lot more complicated, and suddenly there's other players kind of entering the game, and you don't really know what some of these people's motivations are, and you get a lot of like, I really like playing in the morally gray area where you're like, I don't know if I should trust this person or not. I don't know, like they helped us out this one time, but are they going to come back and try and screw us over the next time? Like maybe. It's hard to know. Um, so I like playing in those lines a lot with sort of moral ambiguity and trying to figure out what is good and bad, and is it as simple and clear cut as that? Personally, I don't think so. But obviously some things are clear cut and easy to say, well, that's good or that's bad. But there's a lot that lays in the middle ground where you're like, well, we're all just people trying to do what we think is best and what we think is right. And sometimes we make missteps based on incorrect information. And so we do the wrong thing, even though we didn't mean for it to be the wrong thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like to really develop the characters more and keep the scenery light. I want the characters to drive your imagination on where you are and what's happening. You know, unless it's important to the story, right? If there's really something in detail important, I'll go into it and describe it. But for the most part, you're in a room. You have a few details. It's about the characters and how they interact. To me, a couch is a couch is a couch. You can describe it once saying it's leather. You don't have to go into detail of talk about how aged it is or how what it smells like. It's not pertinent to this story. Um,
I think sometimes it's fun to play with setting if you're trying to make a point about something else, but like a low key point, like maybe it's something that the character will reflect on later on, or just kind of like helps give the vibe of the conversation a bit more. So like in book 6, you have somebody who's she's a spy for the intelligence agency. She works with the High Council. She's kind of like as high up as you can get without actually being the person in charge. And so all of the things that are described in that book is like, well, this building is very opulent. You know, the floors are all polished marble. There's gold leaf on the walls. There's, you know, these beautiful giant chandeliers that hang down from the ceiling. But it's not something that you have to dwell on in a Tolkien-esque way, as much as I love Tolkien. You don't have to like, you don't have to hang on it for quite so long. You can just be like, well, it's there and we're moving on. I would say, is there any character that you have written or you plan to write that you feel like a deep connection to, like a character that you enjoy writing more than anyone else?
So my main character has qualities of myself and a lot of people I've known throughout my life kind of merged together. Um, some of the humor is definitely mine, and some of the inside jokes that I've actually dropped in there that I can get my wife to laugh at or something. Um, I do those, but yeah, for the most one, I think I could associate myself with that main character, but I could also associate pieces of with me with all of my characters, even when I purposely don't write anything about me into them. Um, my wife associates her with the love interest of the main character, um, which is rough because when I gave her a little more detailed backstory, my wife's like, "Oh no, don't do that to her." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Um,
The number of times I've had the "oh no, don't do that" to this character conversation.
yeah, you can't help who someone else associates with, so that's interesting. But I didn't purposely do it. I didn't purposely associate myself with any of them. It just kind of happened. So when I got some of the traits that would be considered mine in the main character, it just kind of fell out as I was, filling out the character's personality. Um, so I think some of the humor you see with the wow, thank you. I'm not even sure what that was. Guacamole, I think. Um, but some of the personality that comes through on that. Thank you. Sorry, my family just got home. They closed the office door. Um, so the humor and stuff really falls through is mine. Whereas in some of the, well, I don't want to get into too detailed on some of the things that would align. The people that know me will find inside jokes in there that definitely come from me. And if you're the community that joke was pointed to, you'll get it. Um, but others won't. I did want to go back to something a little bit about telling the story of really the setting of the scene where it's important. I did do that in a bit more detail, not too much more, but around where an AI, the crew's come into the realization that the AI is actually sentient.
Mm.
And one of the things the AI wanted to do was design a smoking lounge, cigar smoking lounge on the ship.
Big.
And where the main character was thinking about a couch and an ashtray, the AI actually built out a room based on things they've read, had access to books and stuff, and created art that can only be really, it was clearly not recreated. It was real art that was conceptualized by a sentient AI. And when the crew sees that, they're kind of dumbfounded. And so I don't describe the art in high level detail, but I describe the room and what it has. So that when you talk about the art and when it's what it's depicting, I don't go into how it's depicted. I say what's depicted. And that way I think the reader can then start imagining it in a little more
Yeah.
detail, whatever their imagination comes up with. They could be seeing Starry Night or a picture of a spaceship or something, but it would be a little more detailed to them as I give enough information just to lead them to that point to say it's detailed and give a little bit of descriptions. Also, we even talked about the couches a little bit because that was important for the room. Yeah, but typically wouldn't do that for most scenes and situations. But I did do it when I thought really drawing out the creative decisions from an AI that has become sentient.
That's
or
such an
is
interesting
sentient.
sort of, there's such an interesting exploration of sort of like a Turing test kind of idea with like the idea of an AI creating art that is brand new art rather than it being, you know, amalgamations of other pieces of art that they've pulled in from other
Yeah.
sources or whatever.
Now, in this story, it was reaffirming that this AI was sentient. They've been told, but it's hard to be told that, right? It's easier to see that, and that was the point when they saw it.
That yeah, no, that's a really good way of sort of that kind of a reveal. It's a good way of having that reveal, I think.
But that's fun. I can't wait till my second book comes out. I will admit to a little bit of a reactionary stance I took in for the second book. The first book, I have the lesbian character. Did not expect within the first couple of weeks I got a little bit of hate mail. They
Oh yeah,
didn't
that'll happen.
review. They didn't review, and they didn't do it publicly. But they went to my website, found my email address, and gave me a good slew of information. I can imagine you probably see that often. I didn't even think of that. Right? I didn't think that was going to be a response. But because of that response, that character has a little bit more of a relationship in book two, and I introduced two polyamorous couples in book two as well.
Honestly, like that is how I live life though. Oh, you don't like this thing? I'm gonna do thing more now. Enjoy.
And to me, I'm a straight white guy, right? But I think LGBTQ stuff should be normalized. One of our best friends, the godmother of my children, is a lesbian. So it's like in my life, it's normal. So I make it in my books normal.
Well, there's a lot of different queer characters in this series. I have a few of what I call the token straights. Instead of having like the token gay, I have a few token straights. And I did have some feedback of people saying this is unrealistic. It's unrealistic to have this many queer people in a series. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, the entire world doesn't look like this. This is just the characters that I'm writing about in this story, first of all. And I was like, second of all, have you ever actually seen a queer friend group? Because it's just everybody is, you know, like it's that is how it is. Most of the people that I'm closest to are queer in some way. um some of my closest friends are trans or asexual or aromantic or whatever have you. Like that's just normal to me. Somebody has commented and said, yes, be awesome. So I feel like we should take that. We should take that and run with it. The yes, be awesome. um yeah, I one of the first videos here on TikTok that actually did numbers, it was on the wrong side of TikTok, and it was about 24 hours of just nonstop comments from homophobes being like, I would never read this. And it was largely like younger straight men, and I had a few say, oh well, I would read a lesbian book if a pretty girl wrote it, but not if you wrote it. And I was like, bro, you're like 18, I'm in my 30s, I don't really care what you think about how I look.
Wow,
um
that's
Honestly, and
crazy.
it was a little bit intense. And I did go to my writing group and I was like, this isn't my first rodeo with with social media and the internet. Like obviously things can get a little bit wild west, um it was just that it was so much in such a short span of time that I was like, oh, I really wish that I could put the brakes on this, but I can't really without deleting the video. But then you're kind of weighing up, well, do I delete the video and lose out the potential of more eyeballs, or do I delete it to save myself sanity? And sometimes you're not real sure which route to go down.
Yeah, the good old evil that all exposure is good exposure. Yeah,
Mhm.
I get it. Um, I didn't have to go through that dilemma because it was private, but then I did post about it on TikTok, and 100 people saw it or something like that. But yeah, I can't imagine how much. Yeah, I don't feel sorry for you. I regret that people have sent you hate because of who you are. That's just that's horrible.
It
But
is that, like, I feel like I've been out for a long time now. So I guess for me, I'm just kind of like, there's not a lot that can be thrown at me that I haven't probably heard worse of from people I know better. So I'm just kind of like, it doesn't like wound me deeply. It's more of an eye roll response
Sure.
from me at this point. And like, yeah, it does suck. It sucks that it's hard for me to talk about my books on TikTok without getting squished down by the algorithm, because I've spent a lot of, well, you said that you're a software guy, so I'm sure that you are aware of the dangers of algorithms. But I
Oh
spent
yeah.
probably 18 months doing very deep dives into algorithms and how they work. And I read these giant, like massive tomes of how algorithms work, machine learning, and all of this. And I feel like I know too much now. I feel like I've, like seeing how the sausage gets made. I'm too aware now. It's unfortunate, but I am too aware. Um, and so there's a lot of things where companies will go, we're not suppressing queer content. But then in their T's and C's in tiny print, they'll say, oh, well, we won't recommend your content if you're posting things that people might find objectionable. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people who find queer content to be objectionable.
So that's a subject. Yes, algorithms do that. And I've even had some people say that what you should do, this was recommended to me, is I should put a content warning in that I have LGBTQ plus stuff in there. And when I first thought
Absolutely.
about it, I'm like, yeah, I could, but I don't want to.
A content warning. Oh, God.
Because I thought about that. Because, like, sure, maybe the Karen that doesn't want to read the book because there's an LGBTQ person would find it easier not to read my book. Don't think that's the target audience for me. Thank you for the ice cream cones. But it's they're not my target audience. I don't think I would. I honestly think if I were to put that in a content warning, that would put me like on a database of not to read books.
I also
Then I
feel
thought
like
maybe I won on
for
that
people
list.
who want for people who want that as a content warning, I'm like, first of all, I'm not going to put it. But if they read book one and they're that offended, well, great, I got your money for book one, and now you can go away, and that's fine. I'm fine
Yeah,
with that.
that's where I ultimately landed. So I did not put it in, but I
Yeah,
struggled over that for probably 2 days thinking about that. And it
I
was
guess I just kind of feel like if if you're gonna leave me a bad review because there's queer characters or queer content in my books, that's fine. That's a bad review that I am more than happy to take on the chin.
agreed. I actually wish the person who flamed out on me would have flamed out publicly, because I
Yeah,
think I would have got
same.
more people reading because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
give it to me. Just, yeah.
but I do find amazing because I have had a lot of people come back and say, "Why would you do that? If you have a choice to write anything, why would you write abnormal?" And I'm like, "Because I don't want you to think like that. I don't want you to think it's abnormal. I don't want you to think that we're."
That's normal for me. That's my day. Like I was saying about having a bunch of different like queer characters, and that is normal for me. That is my day to day. That is my day to day life. Those are the people that I do talk to on a day to day basis. Like for a lot of us that is normal. Just because it's not normal for somebody who lives a perhaps life in a bit of a bubble of sameness. No, I can see that it would be normal to them, but for a lot of us, it is normal just to have other people that aren't like you around and interacting with you. And for me, I think that that makes life a much richer experience to kind of hear what other people's takes are and, try and hear other people's thoughts on matters, whether they be science fiction books or, some TV show or whatever. And I don't know. I think that science fiction it has done so much. Like if you think about some of the bigger franchises, like Star Trek for instance had the first interracial kiss on television on
Mhm.
network TV or whatever, and it's like that was a huge thing at the time. And sci-fi can be such an important vehicle for normalizing things, for just introducing people to different ideas that they might not have seen before, perhaps in a world building way that makes them not as resistant to it as they might have been
So for
if they
mine,
had encountered it in real life.
I thought it was great because I'm going with basically when you move into this existence, you've forgotten most of what you had from your previous existence. So you remember how to talk and walk, all those good things, but you'll forget if you were married. You'll forget if you had kids. You'll forget if you who your friends were, all of those things are wiped away, and you don't care. So it's not like you're pining for people. It's just you're
That sounds
reset in
great
a
to me.
life,
Let's go.
and it's like you're reset in a life, and you know you might have had a family, but you couldn't say how old the kids were or what their names were, and you don't care. That's the setting I set up with this. And you think about that. If you take a whole bunch of people and take away all the bad memories, take away all their, church memories, take away all their family memories, take away all the society's memories, and now just give them they're an adult in a new situation in chemically balanced bodies. That what are you going to do? I actually think the odds of everybody doing a straight relationships are going to be a whole lot lower. You're going to be a lot more exploring. You're going to be a lot more,
Maybe you're
loving who you
unlearning a
love.
lot of stuff.
So
If you never, yeah, no, that's such an interesting. That's a really interesting concept, and I'm definitely gonna have to add your series to my TBR, because
I,
that's such an interesting concept.
yeah, you
And
take
I
away
think
the
that,
evil from everyone. What are you left
yeah,
with?
just it's like a blank slate, kind of.
Yeah, and so I thought going into that, when I started thinking about what I should do with that one character, I started thinking about it wouldn't just be one character. It wouldn't be just this lesbian character. There's going to be polyamorous couples. There's going to be, you would have so many variations on the couple or relationship because why wouldn't you? Given no qualm about it, and you're just in a new.
No, having no societal expectations, kind of like putting pressure on things externally.
Yeah, and even the religious element I bring in isn't because they remember religion. They built a religion. And it's even everybody admits that that's built off of nothing. Some four guys sat around and made some decisions that they hated people. And that'll happen if even if you blank off everybody's slates, some assholes are still going to be assholes. And that would happen. Um, but yeah, I think it would just be more of an open slate. I couldn't imagine. I tried to put myself in that situation. What would I do? Wow, you give me the adult personality. I set my levels kind of in the 20s of the age groups, and everyone's pretty much chemically balanced. And if you set that up of adults chemically balanced, what would that have ended up with? And you can't have kids. What would that have ended up with? Yeah, I think it would be interesting.
It's it's a very interesting thought experiment, I think.
So I'm doing this. So I start off in my first two books are space opera and sci-fi fantasy, kind of in between the two. My longer plans, though, kind of a spoiler type thing, is I'm going to be doing some fantasy and some lit RPG kind of fantasy because I've created a universe. A little bit of in depth. The universe is basically because the individuals, when they passed away, had a really deep down desire to be in this type of situation. Like you and I, we'd want to be in space opera, right? We'd want to be in space.
Yeah, of course.
Great. But
100%.
other people would want to be somewhere else. Some would want to be in fantasy. Some would want to be in medieval. Some would want to be, who knows, submarines and ships, whatever. Um, my next foray into this is going to be bringing in some of the fantasy. I'm going to kind of lump it together. So let's just say if you had a whole bunch of different types of fantasy and if all that came together in an existence, what would it kind of look like? And that's where I'll be bringing in a couple of books for that. So in this
Oh,
series,
that sounds really cool.
I'm sorry, what?
I said that sounds really cool.
My idea is you've got this group of people with the first books, and then I'll have this group of people with the second books, and then they'll meet. And so we'll have two groups that at some point in time kind of, you know, the universes colloquially called the after. So the after expands more things. So there might be some portals, there might be some ways to get from realm to realm, so to speak. And so that's the plan for the overarching series, is to go from different pieces, but still bring it back to that space opera point. So get the fantasy and then have them join some people in the space opera stuff to solve problems, things like that, solve mysteries. So
Yeah, that sounds cool. I really like the sort of intersection of science fiction and fantasy when you can have a little bit of crossover either way. I think can be really, really fun.
yeah, I think it. So I came across with this because throughout my whole life I've had all these different ideas in my head, and at one point in time, to keep them all straight, I kind of started building realms in my thoughts. And so if I
Hmm.
was, laying awake in bed one night just thinking about a story, I'd be thinking about it in this one realm, so to speak. And maybe I'd be thinking about fantasy. Maybe I'd be thinking about sci-fi. It's kind of where I stuck. A little bit zombie stuff too, but I stick in those realms. But it could be other things that would relate to this. And I just kind of filed them separately in the realms, and then over time, I started thinking about what would happen if they interacted. What would cause them to
Hmm.
interact? And that's kind of where I spilt out with this book. Started off with
That
with
sounds really
this
cool.
with the first one, and I'm just going to go. Don't even know how long right now. Could be 10 books.
Could be 20. You never know, Mike.
Well, maybe actually with novellas, maybe. I have a few.
Yeah.
So some of the things, you have a restaurant at the edge of the universe, so to speak. I kind of have a similar thing for one of my characters. Um, I thought about doing stories off that where they um, find interesting things to do from the restaurant and go from there into different adventures. So a little bit interesting of a plot, I think, but those would be like little novella side stories.
That sounds really cool. The next project that I'm going to be working on is not in the same universe, nor will it be crossover, but it's going to be a sort of noir urban fantasy. I have the first book drafted already, and I hope to draft the second one by the end of the year, but I'm not 100% sure when it's going to come out yet. Um, but you have your sort of grizzled private investigator, and she's just this kind of jaded, bitter woman who doesn't really have a lot of friends, and she's kind of a disaster. And it's over the series, she's gonna hopefully become less of a disaster. But in book one anyway, she's just like everybody's just like, wow, what is wrong with you?
Interesting. I've never thought of doing a disaster main character, but it could be fun. Um,
Yeah, she's definitely like she's good at what she does, but she has so much baggage that she's just like, I'm just not gonna deal with that. Um, and so she's a little bit messy. She, kind of gets together with women that she probably shouldn't, definitely shouldn't. So makes some poor decisions there, but I'm hopeful that people will find it fun, fun world building. And I've always wanted to write an urban fantasy because I feel like you can write a lot of fun stuff with that. And I went for the noir vibe just because I'm a sucker for the aesthetic of noir private investigators. I was like, there's not many of those out there that have women as the private investigators, to sort of the grizzled, emotionally unavailable private investigators. So I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it.
you're right. I don't think I could recall any off the top of my head that would be women. So where's the fantasy part of that? Where is it Monster
Well,
Hunter?
it's
Is
the
it?
urban fantasy part of it. So you have creatures in that. So there's witches and demons and werewolves and
Mhm.
um something that I called seers, where they're kind of, if they're able to sort of like touch an object, they can sort of see into the object's past a little bit. Um, but things still have limitations in that, and the magic in the universe from, because there are witches, but the magic is a little bit more, it's more reagent based rather than just being able to wave your arm around and poof, magic happens. It's a bit more, no, I've had to train to learn, you know to learn how these different reagents interact and to, to try and do things safely and whatever. And so I had a lot of fun drafting that book. I wrote 135,000 words in less than a month because I was just like hyper focused. This is all I was doing. I was working and then I was writing, and that's it.
I get it. When I get into a writing spree, it's what I do every evening. It's what I do every weekend. It's, I'll do 4 or 5 thousand words a night. I'll try to do 10,000 word days on weekends.
Yeah,
And
same.
it's, I don't find it too hard to do that many. Of course, it takes hours, but I don't.
I don't
One thing I
I don't
haven't
feel
had yet is
fatigued.
writer block. I just
No.
it flows out.
If I make myself sit down in front of a keyboard, words will be there. Sometimes the struggle is getting me to sit down if I'm feeling a little bit antsy. But but if I can make myself sit down, I'm like, it's fine. There's ideas, there's stuff there. Like I have ideas for other series that I haven't even started yet. I would really love to do a Wild West cyberpunk. I think would just
A
the
Firefly-ish.
completely insane juxtaposition of that, I think would be so fun. Because you have people walking around with spurs on their boots, but the spurs are neon, you know?
If hmm, if done right, it'd be really cool. Um,
Yeah, I think it would take place on another planet, and the sort of vague idea for that one would be they've lost contact with they were an expedition party to try and go and see if this place could be terraformed and habitable. But something goes wrong, they lose contact with, with Earth or whatever, the main ship. They lose contact and they have no information, they have no supplies, they have to kind of just try and make it work, which is why you end up with sort of the Wild Westness of it. Is they're like, well, we don't have any other resources. We have to make clothing that can be easily repaired. We have to, we don't have the equipment for cars, so we're having to use the livestock that we brought over for other reasons in order to sort of help terraform the planet. We're having to use them to, ride around on and stuff. Um, so that's kind of the vague idea for that, but that's probably at least a year down the road before I get started on that.
yeah, I have a queue of books I need to write. Um, I was trying to do a side series on Kindle Vella,
Mm.
and it was going to be post-zombie apocalypse type story.
I love
I
that.
did an experiment. I wanted to have that really engage the reader and have them give feedback after an episode, and then that might influence the next episode. And so it
That's
wasn't a
cool.
huge dedication of time because I'd only write an episode at a time. Um, Turns out no one on Kindle Vella really is embracing the serialized stories that Kindle Vella imagined.
Mm.
Kindle Vella users only really want to start a series if all the episodes have been published.
It's done. Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe they were imagining people would listen to it like a podcast, like wait for the weekly update, but people are more like, maybe a bit more like, oh no, I don't want to start a
And
series until it's done, sort
like the
of.
old school radio before your time. Uh, I might be old enough, but
Oh
the
yeah, but
old
I grew
school.
I grew up on War of the Worlds though, so
Well, yeah, there you go. World of the World, War of the Worlds is perfect. But that serialized storyline, I thought would be amazing, but no one was interested. I went out and found a bunch of Kindle Vella users and asked them some questions. And they're like, "Yeah, until you publish the whole thing, we're not going to bother." Then I pulled my newsletter readers, and they're like, "Yeah, don't even bother. If you write a book about this, we'll love to get it for free, but yeah, don't even bother sending me episodes. I won't read it." I'm like, wow, I
that
really
is
thought
that
there'd
is
be
a
more for
shame.
that.
Yeah, that is a shame because that concept is so good. Like probably one of my biggest film disappointments was World War Z because I loved the book. I thought the book was amazing, sort of because it was focusing more on the rebuilding of society after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I found more interesting. Sort of like, well, how would this impact the economy? How would this impact global relations? How would this impact, remote areas, like this kind of stuff? And I thought it was amazing. And I was so excited when they released or when they announced that there was going to be a movie. And I dragged my wife to the cinema because she was like, I'm not really into this zombie stuff. And I was like, no, 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 it's not like that. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. And so we went, and it wasn't anything at all, even remotely close to what the book was like. And
Yeah.
like, she had to sit next to me for, 90 minutes or 2 hours with me just increasing in rage with every moment that passed. And I realized that it wasn't going to be what I had hoped it was going to be.
Yeah, that was a disappointment. I will totally agree with you. My book, the general plan I had, because I haven't spent a lot of time writing it because I was going to do the episodes, but the plan I had for it was going to be that. Like I set up this group, called them the 13. These are the 13 people that kind of got together and are making the hard calls to keep society somewhat together in remote communities, to try to save technology, to try to save knowledge, to try to move us forward. And that takes a lot of really hard choices. And of course, there's
Yeah.
still a lot of assholes to deal with, and really a lot of things you got to do with that. So that was the theory around that. I've had a lot of people said they want to read the book. They just want to read it when it is a book.
Yeah, no, I feel that it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Kindle Vella, whether
And
it's going to carry on or whether it's just going to sort of fizzle out or morph into something else, maybe.
maybe when they open it up worldwide, maybe you'll start seeing people that want that episode. But I guess a lot of the early writers burned the readers, and it's kind of a limited set of readers. And they have,
Like not finishing stuff, or
yeah, they put out like 4 or 5 episodes and they just stop. And
mm,
I get it. I'm stopping because no one wants it right now. But I guess early on, people were really wanting some of the early when there was only a couple of books on there. Wanted to have that finished, and authors weren't finishing it. And so a lot of people got jaded on it. Then there's also a lot less tokens that are being given out. So when people are thinking they're going to spend money for tokens, I'm going to spend
yeah,
monies for tokens that I'm going to use on series that I think are going to continue and I could see an end to it. And then I think if you're only going there for a book like experience, because that's what it feels like to me then, that's a really expensive way to get a book. So
yeah.
I'm not sure that this is going to live, but it's a good, interesting experience.
It'll be interesting to see if they try to do other stuff with it, like if they sort of plunk it in with sort of the Kindle Unlimited sort of vibes of things.
Yeah, if they could make it part of Kindle Unlimited, and then you can get a per page
Yeah,
read. Um, but then it's like then you really question because you're really looking at 1,500 word episodes.
yeah. You're
Like, what
like,
are
oh
you
my
going to
god, is
get?
it?
2 or 3 page readings per episode. Um, I'm not sure. That's another challenge, keeping the stories short enough. And I
Keep
like that.
interest?
Yeah, I liked the challenge of keeping it crisp and also keeping, a beginning, middle, and end on every episode. That was actually a fun
Yeah,
challenge because, in books, obviously, we could do that over chapters. But here, it's like every chapter has to have a beginning, middle, end. You got to have a hook to bring the reader back to the next episode. That was actually kind of fun to do. But if you're going to read it, if you're just going to pick it up and read it like a book, it's wasted time.
yeah. I feel you. But sometimes it's a fun writing exercise to try and have to keep things a bit more concise and a bit more streamlined and specific because it makes you think about your word choice a little bit more than you might if you're just writing something that's just a normal long form piece of writing.
Yeah, and you're having to leave a lot more to the reader's imagination, um, which I think is a great exercise, especially for anyone who writes Tolkien like. They
Yeah.
should go through that exercise maybe once a week, but it's definitely helpful for your perspective. I just can't do it the way I wanted to, so I'm not gonna do it right now. I'm
Or
thinking
maybe you
about
should
some
write the
books
book
I want to
then.
do. I'm sorry, what?
I said maybe you should write the book then.
Yeah, it's on my list of books. So now I've got to dedicate a bunch of time to finish it. So I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
I'd get away with 1,500 words a month or so, or every couple of weeks. Yeah, I won't be able to go back and forth to it like that. So I'll have to.
Yeah, I tend to only work on one thing at a time. I know that some people work on, two, three, six different books at a time. I can't. My brain would just turn into noodles. So I have to just focus and just write it until it's done. Otherwise, I get too lost in the weeds on it.
I'm like that as well. I didn't think this one would be bad because I was really dedicating a couple hours a week or every couple weeks. I figured I could have time boxed that, and because I'd be using reader feedback, that might have helped fed my creative juices, so to speak. But yeah, now I couldn't. I'm not going to write book 3 alongside standalone
Yeah.
piece. That's just not going to happen. Well,
I
we've been on here for an hour and 10 minutes. We were only scheduled for about 45. I do have to go for dinner, but I do want to say this was great. Would you
Yeah,
like
it
to
was
do
fun.
lives more often
Yeah,
or
I'd
occasionally?
totally be down for more sci-fi nerd chat. Definitely.
Also, I'm thinking about doing a couple of lives with a couple of authors, so maybe up to 3 or 4 other authors. Um,
That sounds pretty
there's
cool. Bit of a panel experience.
a panel experience. There's another UK author I'm thinking about maybe pairing up with you, me, and her at one point, and see what comes of it as a panel. So I'll add you
Yeah.
to a list of people to keep referring back to occasionally, see if you want to do another live. If ever
Yeah.
you want to do a live with me, just send me a message and
Yeah, will
I'll
do.
do
And
it.
I got a comment from a nebulous purpose that says, "Good chat. It was very insightful." So
Oh, thank
good.
you. I have gotten no questions. I've gotten guacamole. I've gotten microphones. I've gotten a
It's a
thousand
code. You
likes.
have to decode it.
I don't know how many viewers we've had. At one point, we were up to 25, I saw, but I wasn't really paying attention to it too much. 25 on my side, but no
Yeah, it was.
questions.
Yeah, it was like that about a while, but then we've just sort of had some pretty stable viewers for the last 30 minutes or so. So that's good. Thank you
Yeah.
for sticking with us.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for the food, the guacamole, and the microphones and the likes. That's a pretty good amount of likes, thousands. Not bad for a video for me. Um, it was great talking to you. I am adding your book to my TBR list.
Yeah,
Books.
yeah.
um,
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
I will. Yeah, that's good to know. I probably won't get to them for a while though, because I've got a couple that I've done some author swaps with that I have to. I try to commit to those a little quicker. Um, Also willing to do author swaps for you if you ever want to. So,
Yeah,
hey,
sounds
I'll
good.
say this. So, when's your promotion running?
Um, I'll DM you. I can't remember my
DM me.
life right now.
I sent out my newsletters first Saturday of the month. So my next newsletter will be this weekend. No, I won't do it this weekend, but I'll do it the following weekend. Sorry, I'm out of town this weekend. But if you have anything you want to put into my newsletter,
Yeah, that sounds good.
in a week or so.
I do swaps all the time.
So let me know. But otherwise, I do have to run. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Great
All right.
meeting
Thank you
talking to
for
you.
inviting me.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.